Hi, this is Gregory Austin, and before we start our episode with Alex Friedman, I want to share with you a format change. If you've been following BioTalk Unzipped, you've noticed we break up our podcast conversations into 2 episodes at the beginning and the middle of each month. We did that intentionally to keep it to a more easily consumable short form, but finding an ideal stopping point in the middle of a conversation to break it into 2 can be challenging and confusing for someone starting at part 2 of a conversation. So for continuity's sake, we've decided to keep the conversation flowing in one longer form podcast at about an hour, give or take. And we'll launch that on the first Monday of each month. For those who have become accustomed to the shorter form, please forgive our change in format and hope that you pause the recording at the end of your commute or workout or whatever it is you're doing and later pick up where you left off. We really appreciate that you share your time with our podcast. It's not at all lost on us. Thank you. If you haven't done it already, please subscribe or follow us on your podcast platform of choice so we can continue to reach a broader audience. Take care, and I hope you enjoy this next episode.
And there's always this tension, maybe it's a healthy tension, that for the Class 2 world, you make the argument to the FDA that we're not that novel, right? We're substantially equivalent. We don't need new controls. We don't need new human clinical data, right? And FDA will go through it and look through it and say, yeah, and the differences that you've demonstrated that you have the proper controls in place to keep it safe, and maybe you're going to have more labeling than the previous one, maybe even a new warning, right, than the previous one. But yes, we'll let you go through this Class 2 process, 510K.
Alex, I think, I'm fascinated to hear how software is a medical device. In the world that I live in with drugs, we're now seeing that assays can be medical devices. But I had never thought about software as a medical device. And as soon as you're now saying it, I'm thinking, okay, how does that work?
Welcome to the BioTalk Unzipped podcast, where we unzip the stories behind medical progress by sharing the latest and greatest advances in biopharmaceuticals and medical technologies in a fun, entertaining, and enlightening format. And now your co-hosts, Gregory Austin and Dr. Chad Briscoe. Hello and welcome to BioTalk Unzipped, where our mission is to unzip, unlock, and uncover the stories behind medical progress. I'm your host, Gregory Austin. I'm a life science professional from Kansas City. And along with me from North Carolina is my friend and co-host, Dr. Chad Briscoe. Chad is a bioanalytical scientific leader with Celerion, and we publish BioTalk Unzipped twice a month and bring experts from different corners of the pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device worlds to share their innovations, insights, career journeys, and personal stories to the show. Please subscribe, like, and comment on our episodes, and let us know what you'd like to hear about in the future. Thanks for listening. Today on the show, we have Dr. Alex Friedman. He has a PhD in bioengineering from the University of Pennsylvania and afterwards completed a postdoc in biochemistry. Alex started his work in the industry in R&D and quality and has worked into regulatory affairs for medical devices for over 10 years with direct experience with submissions and strategy discussions with the FDA. His most recent work on regulatory strategies is with AI-enabled hospital software. Hey, Alex, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Very good. Hello, Gregory. Hello, Chad. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, Alex, it's our tradition here at BioTalk Unzipped to make a donation to our guest's favorite charity, and you chose Americares, which delivers emergency medical aid and vital health programs to people affected by poverty and disaster. Tell us about this charity and why it's important to you.
Yeah, well, I like this charity very much, and I joined many years ago. I'm originally from the New York area, and they're close by, and I just love their positive attitude. I mean, the world is full of a lot of horrible things that happen, but it takes good people staying positive to try and bring relief to these folks. So I like how they go about their business, and they don't shy away from the negative. But if they're going to do something, they're going to stay positive and bring you along.
Outstanding. Well, we'll be sure to put a link to Americares in the show notes as well. If anyone has any information or any curiosity about exploring more and perhaps making a donation to that cause as well.
Yeah, and I love that. Are they a global charity or are they just a U.S.? I mean, just kind of curious what the reach is.
Yeah, as I recall, they do help globally as well. I mean, their focus must be America.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. It's very gracious of you. I appreciate it. A beautiful gesture.
You bet. And Alex, you, as I mentioned, started your career in life sciences with your training in bioengineering and then the postdoc in biochemistry.
Yeah.
Then you got into work as an R&D scientist, moved into QA and regulatory affairs. Tell me a little bit about that career arc and that journey, and tell us, what do you love about what you do?
Well, they're related. I mean, the research and then the R&D and the regulatory all have a common thread that I like very much. Quality to a degree, because I got to work on quality on developing tests and standing up a simple quality system. But the common thread between research and then R&D and then regulatory is the science. And when you're doing, bench tests or some bioengineering stuff, I did basic research in those days, and I loved it. I was a younger person. I think I wanted, something exciting and new, and being pretty nerdy, studying skeletal muscle myofibrils that other people hadn't. Wow, that's cool, with all these other people with gee whiz microscopy and tiny manipulators and hands work and all kinds of stuff. It's very, very exciting, right? And I don't know, that's what I wanted. And then, the postdoc that I did, originally I was going to do more instrumentation type work, but an opportunity to do hardcore biochemistry came up, and it was exciting. And so I did that and learned an awful lot from that, and learned, there was still a tie between the two labs I worked with. So there was logic there, but that was also basic research. And there came a point where I said, I'm not committed enough to the scientific questions to make a go in academia. It has to be something of a religious devotion to uncovering the truth and fighting for grants and all of that, and moving, right? You're going to move to whatever university where you could start a lab, and it wasn't me. So, my boss at the time, wonderful guy, super successful, and, compassionate guy, got me into a startup in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so I started in R&D, system support specialist, and that became an R&D scientist once I, did some of the science. But it was definitely R&D from the beginning. And that was interesting, and that was practical. But, I also wanted to get a little more practical. So that's when I started thinking about quality and regulatory, something that, that where you can sit at a product development table and take something all the way to product. I mean, that's exciting to me too. But it's as I grew professionally, I got a bit more practical. I guess you get married, you have kids and stuff like that. And maybe you stop dreaming about, the super exciting thing and do something, exciting in a different way. And so what I really like about regulatory, I mean, my favorite part of it is keeping up to date with what the regulatory bodies have to say, because it's their role to protect public health. But to do that, they have to know what's going on. And they're in a very difficult position, at least in a company like America that's so business friendly. Businesses rush forward and get stuff done, and sometimes the FDA is playing catch up. So some of for example, the artificial intelligence enabled solutions, there's just a lot going on, and regulatory affairs has to catch up. And I'd say probably in most technologies, right, it's the innovators that get things done first, and then the regulators have to play catch up. And sometimes it's straightforward, that's a medical device, you need a pre-market submission. Sometimes it's not as straightforward. But it's interesting when you read FDA guidance documents on cybersecurity or clinician decision support, this stuff that I know, you see them doing a survey of everything that's current. So it's very interesting to be part of regulatory and see the process of, our governmental bodies or their surrogates in Europe, keeping track of all the innovations that's going on, and then getting very, very practical. How are we going to keep it safe for society, one? And two, how we're going to make sure that no one's selling snake oil. If you guys know, your listeners, know that one. They have to prove that it's effective as well. It's not just safe. It's also, at least in the United States, I think everywhere, I think all of the regulatory bodies, they don't allow people to make false claims when it comes to people's health or life, saving lives, et cetera. So I just love that interface. And I'd say the last thing about it, I mean, you can hear the passion, right? That I have
Right?
for a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
Is the multidisciplinary nature of it. So that's part of it. That's not, you didn't mention in my career path, but I was an applied physics major. And a personal story is my dad said, "You're going to get a master's degree, right?" And that's the first I heard him say it. I was already a senior in college. I was like, huh, I guess I'm going to graduate school. I opened up syllabi and I thought, oh, mechanical engineering, because I like that, right? But then I came across bioengineering, which was multidisciplinary, and drug discovery is incredibly multidisciplinary. So I'm sure you guys appreciate how many different roles it takes to make, firstly, just to demonstrate feasibility of a lot of these solutions.
Yeah.
Then second, to bring it to market, is a multidisciplinary, team effort. And then to make it successful commercially, that's a whole nother multidisciplinary effort. I just love the diversity of it. And so anyway, back to the story of mechanical engineering, flipping through syllabi, and I came across, studying cows' hearts with lasers and, neural networks to model the brain. And I said, people do that? And then that was it. I applied to bioengineering programs and I got into a good one. And that was it from there. I have never left the multidisciplinary environment of mixing bio with technology or physiology with technology. And so that part, I just love keeping track of what the FDA is doing, or Health Canada, or the European guidance, anything I can read in English, of course. I mean, it's just really neat stuff. Yeah. I mean, obviously I could go on and on, but I think you probably have another question.
So I just wanted to dive into that a little more. So your career path has been devices, right? So
yeah, but not when you say devices, a geeky regulatory thing is, from the FDA perspective, that's regulated medical devices. If you mean if you mean devices that you can pick up in your hand, yeah, for many years it was. I mean, some were big items you couldn't pick up, but more recently it's been software. So software is medical devices and wellness devices, which does that, you get into your question?
Yeah. Well, actually you answered it in a way that I didn't expect, which was great, because that gave me some information I wasn't thinking about, and we love that. So one of the things I was going to ask you to just, a lot of our listeners are more familiar with the drug development pathway. So maybe just educate everybody at a really high level. In drug development, we all know, okay, there's discovery, preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, approval, boom, you're going. How does it work on the device side? Can you kind of contrast that a little bit of what would that pathway look like? And this is, obviously you could spend days probably talking about this, but
I'll try and keep it in a
nutshell. Yeah.
In a nutshell, maybe, a couple of sentences. Please jump in if I'm going too long or too deep. The first thing, and of course drugs are somewhat like this, but I think devices are different this way, is the first thing the regulators want to know from you, the developer, the safety risk profile or the safety risk class. FDA has already done the job. In 1976, they binned all of the existing devices into low, moderate, and high risk, right? 1, 2, and 3. And so to get a class 1 device to market is a different path than getting a class 3 device to market. And if it's a novel device, that's yet another path. So in terms of something you can compare to the drug world, sure. A novel high-risk device, you have to do, sure, there's preclinical work or bench work, and then there are clinical trials. So I'm not an expert in the running of clinical trials. I think sometimes it can be one big clinical trial, could get a new device authorized by the FDA through the de novo process. I don't know enough about the parallel with drug discovery, but it's not quite the same. It's not the tox first and then the dose response curves and then et cetera. I don't think it's quite like that. It's interesting. I'd like to learn more about that, but I don't think it's necessarily as well tread a path as for drug discovery.
Okay.
And I think it's also, if you find, when you look for class 3 devices, this is I haven't been involved in class 3, in the US class 3 devices. So, yeah, I'm going long, aren't I, on your
That's
explanation?
all right. No,
All right,
I'm engaged. You've got me. So,
all right. So that's class 3, but I want to tell you class 2, right? Now, you guys, are you familiar with the term 510K?
sure. Yep.
Sure, right? So that's class 2 devices for the most
Okay.
part. Since it's the FDA, there are always exceptions at the borders of these things. But so for a class 3 device, my guess is every single one needs new human clinical data. Okay. That sounds familiar from the drug world.
Yep.
For class 2, it's still the case that about 10% of 510Ks need new human clinical data. 10%. So that's an interesting thing. And sometimes people in the media or patient advocates, et cetera, will criticize the process because it sounds like the FDA isn't being hard enough on these moderate risk devices. In fact, I don't think it's something that's discussed that often, right? That only 10% need new human. If it's not new human clinical data, then what are you using, right? It's like surrogate. So you do a certain amount, you validate, but it's not like validating with new humans in a prospective or interventional study, right? A prospective or interventional study. Doesn't have to happen. So 90% of the time, that pathway is you prove substantial equivalence. That's a legal term from a law, substantial equivalence. So with devices in class 2, the classic, I think it's a visualizations is helpful. It's easy to find these on the web, or relatively easy, is that you compare the different features and functions and labeling of your device to an existing device, right? And there's always this tension, maybe it's a healthy tension, that for the class 2 world, you make the argument to the FDA that we're not that novel, right? We're substantially equivalent. We don't need new controls. We don't need new human clinical data, right? And FDA will go through it and look through it and say, yeah, and the differences that you've demonstrated that you have the proper controls in place to keep it safe. And maybe you're going to have more labeling than the previous one, maybe even a new warning, right, than the previous one. But yes, we'll let you go through this class 2 process, 510K. But the funny thing is, when you work with marketing, and this is a little bit of an aside, marketing, of course, wants to say, this is new, this is great, this is wonderful, it beats the heck out of the competitors, right? And so on the one hand, you're telling the FDA, oh, it's not that new. On the other hand, the marketing people want to say it is new, it's wonderful. So you always have that little bit of that tension, and you have to say, marketing folks, this is what we said to the FDA. This is the intended use. These are the implied claims in our pre-market authorization. You can't go beyond that, right? And so you negotiate. And then for class 1, I don't personally have experience with supporting class 1 going to market, but some of them are, you find a regulation that exists already for class 1. You register your company with the FDA. You list this device that you're going to make. And I used to have a list of classic class 1 devices at my fingertips, and I'm sorry I don't have it now. But think about I think a tongue depressor or, a light that's used maybe in a surgical suite, that might be class 2, but things like that, an apron or something. Okay. Some of those are low risk. And all you have to do, to my knowledge, is you register your company, you list it, and off you go, and you can distribute it. Does that make sense? There are those 3 levels of control. Definitely new human clinical data, maybe new human clinical data, but a very careful analysis with something else. And then the third one, low risk, register and list it, and off you go. So those are the 3 levels.
So I came up with a game while you were talking, and you actually started playing the game.
Are we playing Wordle? Are we going to do Wordle for this?
Almost. But I have a list of 5 different types of things, medical implements.
Oh no.
Tell me if would they be not a medical device, or would it be like a class 1, 2, or 3? And I realize some of these you might be, it's class 3 and less or something, but
I'm from regulatory. So for all my answers are, it depends. Next question.
Perfect. A Band-Aid. A Band-Aid. Is a Band-Aid a medical device?
Of course it's is that your question?
Yeah.
Of course it is. If that thing wasn't sterile, you get poisoned.
Perfect. Okay.
The sterilization of you said class 1.
Ooh,
You have to give me a moment, and I'll look up on the FDA site and see if it's class 1 or class 2. Right. It's over the counter.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll play that game, but I bet you, I'll brag a little bit. I think once I'm set up, I could answer your question in 60 seconds, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm
All right,
bragging though.
I see.
It'll take me longer since I'm saying that.
This game's more fun than I thought.
All
CT
right,
scanner, CT scan, massive
I would
instrument.
guess it's class 2, believe it or not. I
Yeah.
think it's a
Okay.
very established technology.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's so funny. I'm glad this is recorded because now probably,
Yeah.
I don't know, my regulatory colleagues see me doing this and go, "You idiot, that's a high risk device."
Yeah.
But
Well, no,
my
that's
guess
fair.
is
That's fair.
my guess is
Yeah.
that
Okay.
it's class 2, but
Okay.
that's a qualified one. Yeah.
Okay. Surgical instruments like forceps or a scalpel or something like that. Something that's just a chunk of metal.
Spoken like a non-regulatory person, a chunk of metal. You want your surgeon using a dirty chunk of metal? Those have to be reprocessed, right? Do you know the standards and the requirements to reprocess?
I don't really know.
It is. I'm telling you,
don't
it's
know.
tough. They don't pull out a disposable chunk of metal. They sterilize it before they use it again.
Yeah.
What happens
All
if it
right.
has nooks and crannies in it and you can't get the bacteria out because someone decided to put their logo in tiny little micron etched writing? I mean, so I would guess it's class 2 because of the special controls.
This is a fun game. I got 2 more.
All right.
This one I'm certain I want sterile, a heart catheter.
3. I think
3
that's
without a
class
doubt.
3.
Yeah, that's just like that
Easy.
one's high risk. Okay,
I
last
would
one.
think so.
Like how about like you go in and you sprain your ankle, and they send you home with an air splint, like just like something for your ankle. Like
That's
like
a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that one. I might beg that. I'm not. That's a tough one. Whether it's class 1 or class 2, I would guess it's class 1, and maybe it depends on the actual intended use of that device. If it's for a break, maybe it's class 2. If it's for a sprain, class 1. But if it's to hold something to treat the condition of a broken bone, that is has higher safety risk than a sprain where you're immobilizing it. Or one of those wrist things you wear for carpal tunnel or something.
I pick it up at Walgreens or something. Yeah.
Right. I could see that being a class 1.
Okay. Well, that was fun. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Oh, it was really interesting. I learned a lot actually from that game. That was fun.
That was fun.
So, Alex, I think I'm fascinated to hear how software is a medical device in the world that I live in with drugs. We're now seeing that assays can be medical devices. So, but I had never thought about software as a medical device. And as soon as you're now saying it, I'm thinking, okay, how does that work? Enlighten us. This is new to me.
Yeah, software as a medical device. So I'll up the information just a little more and say that not only software is a medical device, but artificial intelligence enabled software as a medical device is a pretty hot thing. And the FDA has authorized about 1,000 either devices or modifications to devices to software as medical devices. So you can go to a website and see all of the authorizations. And I'm going to correct myself. There may be some that are software in a medical device. The FDA makes that distinction, software as a medical device, software in a medical device. But certainly you'll see some standalone software there that's very interesting. And when you go to those sites, you can click on a device and then you click on the link for 510K summary and you'll get a nice description. That's public information. And for the de novo, there are 2 documents to look at. And you can see, some really interesting high level stuff there and then get a sense. So let me, give you an example of software as a medical device, something that FDA would have cleared just as a medical device. So software that's used to analyze ICU data for hemodynamic instability, right? It's the part what's interesting is, of course, it's still part of a system, right? You have to have the hardware to measure, the stability to begin with, right? To measure blood pressure, et cetera. But the FDA, in these authorizations, I'm almost positive about this, that they clear it. They call it clear it, authorize this 510K for use with devices that meet these specifications. So the hardware has to meet these specifications, and then the software is standalone. So the software itself is considered, a complete package. So clinical planning software, if you're going to plan a surgery, that's all contained, in and of itself. That is sophisticated enough and complete enough and has a user interface that's distinct enough that that's just one medical device. I know. Are those two good examples?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this leads really well into our first new news segment. So we'll kick it off with new news.
New news.
New news coming at you from the studio.
All right. So in an article that came out, it's really a company update from Access Newswire. It's an innovative app from Before Health Intelligence, which identifies early signs of cardiac issues using wearable device data. So this came out recently, just this past November. Before Health Intelligence emerged out of the stealth mode and announced a new mobile health app called Antshrike.
Say that again?
Antshrike. And Antshrike is actually a bird that warns of danger. So that's why they picked the name. So Antshrike uses AI to transform wearable device data into highly precise and specific predictive cardiovascular health warnings. It's an iOS app, and it will use proprietary AI algorithms to identify these early warning signs of critical cardiovascular events, such as a heart attack or a stroke, with high predictive accuracy, which is a pretty bold claim for individuals at risk. So the app processes these biometric, time series data collected by either Apple smartphone or your smartwatch, calculates the individual risk of critical events in real time, and then predicts what may happen and what state. So by notifying patients in imminent danger in advance, they're trying to intervene and help with better medical outcomes. They claim, this is interesting, that it predicts danger and timing of cardiovascular events with more than 85% accuracy in a personalized manner. Now, I don't know how they know this because there's no clinical data that I'm aware of. I went to their website and all it says is recently completed beta testing on the software. Not sure how they did that. But so I have a couple questions on this. First of all, what is your kind of candid response to this new app that's coming out, software as a medical device?
Well, I mean, there's lots and lots of things, but the first thing I have to ask you, what regulatory information do you have about this new device? When you say device, zero regulatory.
No, it's just they haven't done any clinical testing. They're in fundraising mode. They're coming out of stealth. It's a small company.
Got it.
So it's probably, and I'm just guessing. I haven't done any background on the CEO of this company, so I apologize if I'm wrong. But a lot of cases, the CEO is a developer or a software executive that has this great idea, and they hire these great software engineers to build this, but they don't always know the right regulatory pathways or what a quality management system is and these types of things.
Sure.
So we'll see. So what are some of the regulatory hurdles or concerns do you see with this type of software?
Let's start with a quality management system, right? In order to be a developer of a medical device, you need to have a quality management system per 21 CFR 820, and then you have to follow the labeling regulation that goes along with that. And when new companies go, what's that? That means that they need a consultant or they need a full-time experienced quality person to build their system. So without going too deep, it's, hey, how far along have they come with that? So if you were an investor in this company, I would want to know, okay, what are your connections or what are the board's connections to quality system experts? Because you have to prove to the FDA that you know what you're doing. And, for example, what companies get tripped up over a lot is CAPA, so corrective and preventative action. It's very hard to do. And you better be able to figure out how you're going to correct things when they're in the field, right? When someone claims that my dad died because the watch didn't say he was going to have a heart attack, and how do I know it wasn't a bug in your software? It was green. It was green, and he was confident because he knew that he had some risk, but he went ahead and jogged anyway because your watch said it was green, right? And he drops dead of a heart attack. And was it a semicolon in the wrong place because you didn't have the right quality checks? Did you just do an update recently? All that stuff. So I can't help it. Early in the program, I talked about how I got more interested in the practical. It's all that stuff, boy. It takes such a multidisciplinary team, like 3 teams, to take a wonderful concept from maybe academia or somebody's, den and turn it into a successful medical device. My goodness, is it difficult? So that's on the practical side. On, my entrepreneurial side, I absolutely love it, what you just described. So I'll tell you what I know, what instantly it made me think of. Apple Watch, I believe it was 3, had a feature that when, the heart rate was in such and such a state, then they would let a user know there's something funny going on. Maybe you should see a doctor. It was not listed as a medical device, right? I don't know whether FDA allowed it or didn't allow it, knew it didn't allow it, but there is a press story you can look up of a young woman who says, my life was saved because this dumb little watch told me I had a something. After that, Apple worked with FDA and have had 2 de novos. It was about 5 years ago, 2 de novos, one for arrhythmia and one for ECG. And I just love it. I love to see that they, Apple did it right. Now, is it commercially successful? I have no idea, but what a shame if it's not, right? They did everything right, everything. They worked with the FDA. They did the clinical data. It could save lives, right? But it's a feature on your watch. How much are people paying for it who don't have an issue? This idea, however, is completely different. Do you guys remember the Holter monitors? Holter monitors?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Chad, you want to tell Gregory what a Holter monitor is?
Tell me.
Well, it's the like chest thing that you wear to monitor your heart rhythms.
Yeah.
And,
What's so important is it's away from the doctor, right? Away from the doctor. And, mercifully, I don't have experience with it. My family did, but I was a bioengineering student, et cetera. I learned about this stuff. But I think it's like, 3 weeks or something, you walk around and you're collecting this ECG data like constantly, right? So that's meant to the doctors, the cardiologists who are at such a loss because the patients they care about are walking around. They don't know if something's going on, right? So and it's 3 weeks and it's big and it's bulky. Apple solved that with something beautiful. It's a thing you wear already. You get your music and you talk to people through it. Now it doesn't do as good a job as a Holter monitor, I would guess, but fantastic. They solved it. So this one, the app, the claim that they're making that it's going to predict, that's different than an arrhythmia detection, which is history of something that's happened. If they're going to measure a bunch of physiological signals and predict that something's going to happen, wow. We're all about the same age. I think I liked science fiction as a kid. And every time I see a Star Trek something actually happen, I'm just floored by it. I think it's so cool. So even on Star Trek, I don't remember the first Star Trek or the subsequents. I remember someone just going, oh, hey, you're going to get sick. I didn't watch that many episodes, but something that's monitoring people all the time to go, hey, you're at risk of, heart is the most obvious one, but that's a fantastic thing, isn't it? Doesn't it excite you guys to think, and what do they have to, 100%. We say wearable. So obvious next, and then I'll stop all my geeking out on this stuff. The obvious next thing is, are you talking about something, with low impact like a watch? Or is it more like the Holter monitor where you get a prescription and you have to wear it? Are these for people who aren't at high risk for cardiac events? Or is it for, the opposite? So I still love it. And my guess is that it's something smaller. In this day and age, it's probably
to answer your question. Yeah. No, it's they're targeting iOS, specifically the Apple Watch.
Oh, okay.
So they're probably dovetailing to some extent off of the success Apple has now had in getting that cleared, right, for their device.
Maybe they're hoping Apple will buy it from them. Right? That happens
now, that's probably what it is.
So something related to that, Alex, and I'm curious your opinion on this. So if you watch, I would guess most of the top level pro sports have this now, but if you watch soccer, particularly for some reason, soccer players, even when my kids played in high school, they always, the guys, well, even the ladies, they always want to take their shirts off after the game, right? Certainly the ladies have something on underneath it, but I'm going to get us in trouble on this podcast now. But no, you see the guys, and it's really striking because you see the guys take their shirts off now after the game, and they're all wearing, it looks like they're wearing a halter top.
I didn't know that.
Like
Yeah.
women at Woodstock wore, right? Like that 1960s, 70s halter top. And they're wearing this monitoring device and this monitoring software to know every step they make on the field, every aspect they can possibly gather. And then you go, wait, okay, so, well, I'm going, wait, you already know the answer to this. You're going to tell me, maybe. Is that a medical device?
I was hoping you were going to ask that question.
Is that a medical device?
Yeah.
Oh, look at the time. No, I want to answer that question because that's just another thing that I'm fascinated by. So it wasn't what I'm doing now, but what I did previously professionally. Is it a medical device? I doubt it. But it depends on their claim. So it's fun talking to you guys since you haven't been in medical devices. This is new to you, but I think plenty of people who are in medical devices also haven't quite heard this story. You know, your body generates so many electrical signals all the time, right? It's kind of cute. If you could have a visualization of it, my goodness, the amount of stuff that comes off of us is probably ridiculous.
Is that called your chakra or something like that?
Right. It was figured out 3,000 years ago. They knew all this. The right meditative state, and you can see all of it and lay hands and fix problems. So, but anyway, there's nothing medical about it in terms of, there are diseases and conditions. So medical devices in the United States are diseases and conditions. Okay. But if you don't have a disease, you don't have a condition, and you're getting measurements off of your body, it's not a medical device. Now, it's the claims, believe it or not, and that gets back to the legal stuff. And a lot of people don't quite get how fundamental that is. What are you communicating to the public, be it the broad public, the clinical public, the specific doctor, or the patient? It's what you write down. That's all the FDA has to really go on. Or what you say on a trade show floor. It can even be like that. So I guess you guys know that from the drug world. So when it comes to a device like that, my favorite example is heart rate monitor. And it might be oxygen tension too, because the pulse oximeters give you both really common ones. And if your written claim or your verbal claim is that you monitor, you're going to be a medical device. If you provide an alarm, you're going to be a medical device, maybe even an alert, because an alert to what? An alert to that you have an unhealthy heart rate or a heart rate that suggests a disease or condition, you're a medical device. But if you only claim that you're measuring, number one, and leave it at that, you're not a medical device. If you're claiming that you're measuring to improve athletic performance, you're not a medical device. If you're measuring to gauge your wellness, you're not a medical device. And there's a wellness guidance document that even goes as far as to say that if you're measuring to, I'm see if I can get the words exactly right, aid in the, I'm forgetting it, aid in the management of diabetes or something like that. Aid in the management of this soft language where you're just aiding. So they let you go that far as to mention a disease or a condition, but as long as you qualify it in living, I think what it is living well with. I think that may be what it says, right? That they won't regulate that either. So related to also your question of, is this a medical device, right? What people in regulatory say, if you ask them enough, does it meet the FDA's definition of a medical device? The first question is somewhat philosophical, and regulatory people don't work in philosophy. We work in regulations which are based on law, which hopefully, gets us away from philosophy, the very practical things. So this thing here, if it is to detect whether one of the players may have a heart attack, which it may, right? I forget that phrase in that condition, but where your left ventricle is too big, no one notices it, and the most common symptom is sudden death. Oh my God, for these people wearing it, happens to athletes. I forget how often, but Google it and I bet you'll find a few each year. This thing, if it's got that feature, that sounds like a medical device to me. If it says that it's monitoring performance, then just, athletic performance, not a medical device. And the last thing that I'll say to you about it is I also want to know, is it for the athlete to look at the data and their trainers to look at the data afterwards? Or is there someone on the sideline monitoring all the players at once? And is their AI working, telling them who's where? That person needs a rest. They're about to go over the performance curve into where they're going to grade. Pull them out. And then the last
Pull
thing,
out, yeah.
Gregory definitely wants to say something. Can I sneak in one more fun thing?
Yeah, go for it. And I got 2 comments. Sure.
All right, come on, science fiction. I can't help it. I mean,
All right.
so Mars landers, everything that I see happening, I'm like, I saw something like that in a movie once, right? And so the one that I like is Aliens 2. Aliens 2.
Yeah.
Remember that
The
one?
captain sits in the stupid safe box while his soldiers are out there fighting the bugs, and he's monitoring all their physiological signals.
Right.
Yep.
Are those
Remember that.
medical
You're right.
The whole
devices?
time.
No, I don't think they're medical devices.
Yeah, they're
I
just
don't
monitoring.
think.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
bet you those soldiers hope that someone does the right quality control on those.
Right.
And
Right.
today, I wouldn't be surprised if such things exist in the military.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I
I'm
would
sure.
think so.
Yeah. So, and I kind of wondered to dovetail off what you're saying about the real-time monitoring. If it's not happening now, it will be, I think, very soon. Because we see this in the NFL, right? You know, it's like, Saquon Barkley, broke off for a, 60-yard touchdown, and he was, they'll give you his miles per hour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
He's
like,
got to have that device
Down to
on him,
2
right?
decimal
Right.
points.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there is also a medical device and I don't know that it's approved yet, but it's a mouth guard that you would wear that would record how hard you're getting hit in the head.
Oh my God.
Right?
Oh,
It's
wow.
getting that concussive force, right? And I think it might actually, I could be wrong about this, also monitor heart rate as well. And I'll look that up and put it in the show notes later. But it was kind of cool.
It is.
That
That's very
just about
fascinating
anything
stuff.
you can wear.
But I'll
Right?
tell you what,
Yeah.
the manufacturers of those and the lawyers for the NFL and the lawyers for the players union, they're going to ask, is that a medical device?
Absolutely.
And then who's
And I
accountable?
think it would
Because
be.
you know what's fascinating? And it's in this way, in the drug world, who the heck is going to release a novel molecule to be used and who's going to use it, right? It's not going to happen without the testing. But with devices, be it software, hardware, software, and wearables, it's already happening. So, people perceive them as lower risk. The best one is just look it up, concussions. Concussions is a very interesting one because the FDA came out, and I saw it a year ago, warning people not to use these apps to, to assess concussion for athletes. They said, don't do it. But guess what? They still exist and they're out there. FDA is not regulating them, but they say don't do it, right? So, wow. I mean, they're probably using enforcement discretion, it's called. And I don't want to really judge that as right or wrong but I'll tell you the difference. What's so fascinating, that's why I want to get back to the drugs. What's seems different with devices than drugs to me is that 510K or that de novo, that reduces your liability risk, period. Yeah. If anything goes wrong, I had all the test data reviewed with the FDA. I had the test protocol. I had my monitoring. Everything was reviewed with the FDA. They're aligned that it was good. Judges and juries are going to take credit for that. Yep. Yeah, you did the right thing. Shame on the FDA for missing it, right? Blah, blah, blah. But if you go out there with your heart monitoring thing and you tell people we'll catch whether one of your athletes has gone over the edge and maybe will have this and that condition, right? Even heat stroke, right? If that's your claim, we'll catch heat stroke, and they have heat stroke, or you see where I'm going there. There's easily, a small lawsuit over that. Or if you use it for kids, right? Kids playing on the soccer field. Oh, they said we'll monitor all of them the whole summer. We'll monitor all kids the whole summer. Anyone approaching heat stroke, our software will do it, our hardware will do it. And they go, I don't care if it's a medical device or not, I trust you. And then it doesn't work, and then 3 kids have heat stroke and get really sick. Yeah. Who are you going to sue? Right? If you had the FDA clearance,
everybody who has money.
Yeah, exactly right. I was going to say.
Well, the soccer league probably doesn't have that much money.
Yeah.
True.
Depends on which one. Yeah.
Right. So, Alex, you wrote a white paper in 2023 entitled An Overview of Clinical Decision Support Software from a Regulatory Affairs Historical Perspective. And it discusses that the evolution of those clinical decision support tools, starting with the Public Service Act of 1944. How has this historical foundation influenced the current challenges and opportunities in regulating AI and machine language-driven CDS systems? And do you have any predictions of where you see it headed?
Let me think about that. And,
Sure.
I am going to cheat. and just, for your listeners, since we're such an informal bunch, that'd be
Sure.
this paper?
It would be that one.
So I had
That's the
it
one.
ready in case the conversation went that way. And
Sure.
yeah, I mean, so where we are currently, in the timeline, of course, is that there are clinical decision support standalone software packages out there, right? And many of them are powered by AI. And so, some are going to be regulated and some are not. Some are going to be lower risk, some are going to be higher risk. Certainly in the past, you can see that, back and forth between the Congress and the Department of Health and Human Services on what we're going to do about software such as this. How are we going to regulate it? And on the one hand, you have obvious medical devices, the FDA regulates it. And so the future for even the riskiest of AI software, the software that can change itself, unlocked,
Right.
no human in the loop,
Right.
etc. That's the riskiest. Of those 1,000 FDA authorizations, 0 change themselves. 0 are unlocked or adaptive. And it's so new that even people don't agree on the terminology. So I'll call it adaptive versus locked. So when it comes to the adaptive stuff, FDA hasn't authorized any, and I'm not aware of any that's out there that does anything serious that, doesn't have FDA clearance or authorization, right? No one's taking that chance. But when it comes to your Amazon shopping buddy, like it's doing it, right? It's learning on the fly because the risk is low. So where is this going? It's interesting because it looks like, that area is a little bit stymied now, right? But once the research papers come out and once the clinical, trials are done and it looks good, then, and maybe it's happening already or happened, then there'll be pressure on the FDA to let these self-changing apps do their thing. It's just, I think the FDA doesn't have the expertise yet. I attended... I want to say an advisory committee. I watched it. It was not like I was invited. I watched a public conversation, advisory committee. And those folks were talking about generative AI. So things that generate new things. It's AI and it generates new stuff. And so that people are worried about. But you combine that with something that generates new stuff and does it on its own. I mean, my goodness, you get into the philosophical of like, is that intelligence? How much is that like a human being? How much is that like practicing medicine? So actually, you're setting me up. My last thing is, future of protecting public health with respect to safe and effective CDS medical device, right? I mean, my goodness, if it's generative and it's unlocked, so adaptive, so it makes new stuff and it changes while it's even the underpinnings of the making the new stuff. And for me, what I always think about, from a public health standpoint, underserved populations, if you could have a program that could behave like a doctor and do specialist work out in a rural community or a developing country, and it could do it with 95%, accuracy, etc., imagine how many people would be helped. You take the smartest and the best doctors, they create, doctors, nurses, whichever clinician, specialist, they create the ground truth, which is the reference data, and then you train the model on that. And plus you give it the smarts to know what do you do when things change. And maybe those are adjudicated reference data sets too for this scenario, that scenario, this scenario. Put all that in the machine and it all works. Why would we withhold that from these underserved populations? Why would we do that? Right? But then, well, what does the FDA do in that case? So what I say there, and this is Alex, the science fiction fan, right? It's really, it's playing the futurist, right? So futurists are not science fiction dreamers. They're really trying to think about what's coming in the future. For me, and what I say in here is that the FDA can't regulate the practice of medicine. That's left to the states. And in working, on ventilators and these clinical decision support devices, like you can't put in your labeling, do these clinical things with this device. And when I say clinical, it's a level of how much you're telling them to. You can set them, you can take them there, but you can't tell them how to practice medicine. FDA will tell you can't have that in the labeling. You can't put that in your user interface, right? Let the doctors do their doctoring, right? But once this software gets to the point that it appears to be doing the doctoring, but it's still a device, should FDA regulate that? How are they going to get their experts on their reviewers of the 510Ks, then the de novos, right? Or the pre-market authorizations for class 3. How are they going to build their corral of experts to actually understand and test this thing that's as smart as the smartest doctors? How are they going to know that it works? So it may be an act of Congress when this gets far enough along. Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? Is it 50 years? I don't know, but it might be coming. And the best example that I'm aware of, which I was taught, and then I repeat to other people, is IDXDR. If you check out that device, IDXDR, diabetic retinopathy. The FDA has cleared that thing to be so close to being a specialist, but they take it one step before it. A doctor has to make the diagnosis. But man, it looks really, really, really good, right? So it's coming. This stuff is coming. And then the generative and the adaptive, you put that on top of it, and what is the FDA going to do? It's hard. I think maybe new legislation would be needed.
It brings up interesting questions with some of those diagnostic tools, because I would, whether it's, diagnosing diabetic retinopathy or reading X-rays or even you think about, self-driving cars. I know that's out of the medical device, but it's the thing that we see in the news. Even if they do a better job than the person who's driving, the person who's interpreting the X-ray, the person who's diagnosing cardiac events, even if they're interpreting them, even if the AI is doing a better job, that one time that there's a crash, that there's something missed on the X-ray, that something is missed, even if the incidence is 10 times lower, that's still going to be a different kind of lawsuit, and it's going to be a different type of issue that comes up. Now, across that kind of broad span of things I used as an example, it brings up all sorts of issues. I think it's a matter of getting comfortable with it, and that's how we go, right?
I can comment on that. And it's unfortunate that it might be more of a gender thing, but like guys go back to cars a lot, I found. But cars are a great example to follow. And I didn't do the history of it, but you can just see it. Of regulations, right? Because the first cars that came out, people ran around on the roads. They probably didn't have red tail lights, right? Things like that. And we take it for granted because we grew up with it. You look at the classic pictures of a highway at night, and it's white lights in this direction and red lights in that direction, right? So they were all scary to begin with. And some people say, I would never go on a vehicle like that. I'll stick with my horse, right? But the younger people take more chances and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it'll be, as this stuff develops as the standalone dock. Can you imagine dock in a box, standalone dock, which is software running? Older people will go nuts with that. I'm relying on my doctor. And the younger people are going, I'm sick, I need an answer. This thing just told me that I've got strep or something, whatever it is. And it goes, look, I trust it because of this reason and that. And then what happens is that it's right, and you get your antibiotic and the strep goes away, and you tell your other young friend, and then they do it, right? So I think it was the same thing with cars, and it took, and then all those red lights and then speed limits, and then the same color signs, the green signs that we have, and the white with the black on all over the whole United States. There's probably some people back then going, I don't want the government to tell me what to color my sign, right? Eventually the generations move and you start to accept this stuff. So I don't know about you, but yeah, I saw your serious faces. So I'm talking about those dock in the boxes before and what they can do. We're all like, oh my goodness, what is that? What will the FDA do? Well, FDA, the government, at least in a beautiful free democracy like ours, right? The government's there. It'll be there. And, it's not going to be just released to the world because so many people are on top of this. It's not going to be just released to the world. Your next hospital has no people and just machines in it. Right? It's not going to be like that. So it'll happen slowly and somewhat deliberately, and there will be mistakes. And unfortunately, there'll be some people hurt, but there'll be a lot of people helped. And hopefully we get there one day where there are fewer false positives, there are fewer false negatives, and the quality of care. Look, now everything's rosy, but I think it's going to happen. I think there's a lot of churn now, but man, oh man, the concept of taking the smartest doctors and taking all their experience and putting that into a server farm and have it behave like a doctor. Only guess what? They're going to be programmed to be polite. They're going to be programmed to never insult you. They're going to be programmed to be available at 2:32 a.m. when your heart flutters. I mean, I don't know. I think the future's okay. I think the future's okay for this as long as the proper regulatory oversight exists. And I actually have one other list plug for all the hospital systems and administrators. All these people, they're all trained in medicine, right? So, they have the safety. They're trained in safety from the start. So I'm optimistic it'll work out, and a little heartened that there isn't some crazy software that adjusts itself and all the rest, and it's treating patients right now, like not even in the world. I mean, if you check the news, and every country's different, right? So there'll be some country we'll see them move faster than the United States, I think. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Yeah. Anyway, you touched on something I'm so fascinated by.
Yeah. Awesome. Me too. So that's great. I appreciate that.
I hope other people are interested. I feel like we just geeked out on what we like. Hopefully other people find it interesting.
That's all right.
A long time ago, Alex, a guy that I consider a mentor, I was helping him organize a conference. And I said, man, I just, I was early in my career. I said, I just don't, what do I do? And he said, you know what? If you pick things that you're passionate about, he said, a lot of people. He said, if you're really passionate about it, you think it's really interesting, then there's probably other people out there that think it's pretty interesting. So, So I think, I think we're not alone. This stuff is fascinating.
Indeed. And it leads all this conversation, again, perfectly on-ramps me to our next new news.
New news.
New news?
Recently, article came out in Fierce MedTech, the 2025 forecast, how will AI, regulators, and the government intersect? So the article explores this intersection of AI regulations and government and healthcare, highlighting the FDA's efforts to adapt, as we were discussing, to the advancing AI technologies, such as its guidance on predetermined change control plans, PCCPs, for adaptive AI updates. Discusses the potential impact of the new Trump administration's AI czar, the bipartisan congressional efforts to promote responsible AI advancement while addressing patient safety, data quality, liability concerns, and so forth. And the piece underscores the need for updated regulations, to align with these rapid technological processes and progress. So what's interesting to me is there's also some changes going on, of course, a lot of changes going on with the new administration, and we're taking away what looks like some of the guardrails on AI, at least from a previous administration. Is that, I don't know, have you heard anything about this, Alex? Have you thought about what the changes might come? Do we have any prediction, or is it just kind of hold on to your seat and let's see what happens?
Yeah, well, I certainly have a lot of thoughts on it. I don't think I have any I don't have inside information.
Knows, right?
I don't have inside information except that, I've supported these technologies. But one thing, you said the word adaptive and PCCP, right?
Yeah,
so I think for the listeners, we have to just stop for a second. The PCCP, I mean, it depends on how deep we go, but PCCP, predetermined change control plan, predetermined change control plan. So when it comes to your average 510K, you can read a guidance document for when you need to submit another 510K because you changed your device. Does that make sense? And then that's yet another gray area that business people and regulatory people argue about internally. Is that really a trigger? Do we really need a report and an FDA review before we go to market? And regulatory says, yes, you do. That's a trigger. Look at this guidance document. I'm sorry, it's not gray. That's a trigger. You need to do it. Oh my goodness, that's the prep time because it's the SMEs. All the subject matter experts have to support the submission and work with regulatory. So it could be 2 months of work beforehand. Then you submit it. Then they review it for, their 90 days, but take 3 months. Then you have a meeting with them. Then you argue about something with them. Then you negotiate, and it's 5 months later. So by the time you start engaging this company, the business's resources, the time you actually go to market, could be 7 months, right? So the business leader is always like, I don't want to do it, right? I don't want to do it. They push. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There are plenty of business leaders that understand the process and want to be, in very good alignment with the FDA. But it's just, it's part of being a regulatory professional to answer those questions. And so, what the heck are you going to do about an AI device that you're going to really wait not only 7 months, you do your feasibility, it takes months, you do the demonstration. It's great. It's good to go. Now you're telling me you need another 7 months. So that's a year from concept or, whatever. Like it only took us 2 months to retrain this model and get it to this next step. We want to make this other claim. Now I have to wait 7 months, but it only took my developers a month to do this, right? And so people get frustrated with that. And they say, what a model, what a crazy regulatory model. So instead, what FDA has offered and has implemented, and I'm going to say successfully, is when you submit your 510K, and the first PCCP guidance was for AI, and recently there's been a PCCP guidance for everything, for all devices, not just AI. So AI first because the business wanted it, maybe their own internal reviewers wanted it, and then followed by for everybody, because it makes so much sense. And I'm going to try and not editorialize, because I will give you two perspectives though that I heard at the last regulatory national conference. It's called RAPS, Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, because PCCP was presented, and then there was a discussion that happened in the audience too, right? So, but anyway, so for PCCP, in your 510K, you tell the FDA, this is how we're going to change the device. So ahead of time, you get your marketing people to say, look, this is in the works. This is what we want to do. We're going to retrain it on another set, and then we're going to expand our claim. Well, like PCCP, you have to keep the same intended use. So it's a little bit limited. Whatever, you're going to retrain or something, and it would ordinarily trigger a 510K, right? But it's not very drastic. So for PCCP, it's a middle ground. Not so drastic that you change your intended use statement, but not so minor that it wouldn't even trigger a 510K. It's like a moderate 510K trigger. Great. Describe that to the FDA. Here's our plan, and we're going to do it this way and this way, da-da-da. That description is, from what I gather and from what I read, as complex as the 510K itself. You're going to tell the FDA, here's what we're going to test. Here are our acceptance criteria. The ranges for the acceptance criteria, the upper limit and the lower limit, are clinically valid for these reasons, right? So all that, even your testing and your acceptance criteria need to be clinically validated. You set all that up for the FDA and they say, beautiful, go. I don't need a second 510K from you. So that CEO now hears, great. So for that next gen that we're going to do, where my developers only take a month, I don't need to go to the FDA. I love it. Thank you. Yeah. So that's what it does. That's what it's supposed to do. And the people on the panel, said from the FDA, and I think at least one from industry, it's a program, it's working, I like it. But then I think I actually asked the question of, what do you think is better, to do a special 510K or a PCCP? A special 510K is a shortened 510K. It's shorter, same fundamental scientific technology, and the FDA has 30 days to review it. So it can go faster. Instead of 5 months, it could be 2 months, right? And, the advice was, actually, I think there was a pause on the panel, like, and then there was a little disagreement among the panelists. Okay. But then a very experienced person that I knew in the audience after I turned, he said, I always tell people internally to do a special 510K. I'm not ready to buy the PCCP path yet. Isn't that interesting? So I'm sure there are other people that are thinking it. And in regulatory, at least in the FDA, there are plenty of people that take a wait and see. There's the Breakthrough Device Program. There's the Technology Assistance Program, I think, TAP. There's different things that the FDA is actively working on to help innovation. No two ways about it. They hear it loud and clear. They hear it from the Congress. They'll hear it from this administration. FDA, get in line, help these things get approved. Don't give me all those stop signs, right? So they're doing things like this PCCP. So by the way, this PCCP came into existence under the previous administration, right? So, this wasn't all whipped up because, oh God, what's coming? Not at all. This was developed a while ago and perceived a while ago. So I answered some of your question, but I would like to get to good. What do I see changing with this administration?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't think a whole lot, believe it or not, because I don't see the FDA holding back AI innovation unless somebody in the new administration wants to do what I was just saying is unwise and say, let those self-changing algorithms go, right? I see, I've spoken to researchers, I've spoken to people at hospitals who have tested some of this stuff. That's going to save lives. These brilliant, programs that are as smart as a doctor, let them update, let them go, right? My guess is it won't work. I don't think Congress would allow it. What's interesting, it was the Biden executive order, right? And I'm trying to remember, it was on AI, right? But that's so focused on eliminating bias, reducing discrimination, those kind of broader societal things in health. That PCCP guidance is for medical devices, period, end of story. I don't think this administration is going to muck with the way medical devices, AI medical devices are regulated. The executive order, I'm sure that, I think I already read some of it's rescinded, right? It's basically let the health tech industry have more latitude. And, there's such, fortunately or unfortunately, diversity, equity, and inclusion does not have as much respect in the current administration relative to the previous administration, for good or ill. There's pros and cons. I'm going to try not to editorialize. But for that executive order, there was a good deal of it in there, a great sensitivity towards equity and justice and not leaving out groups. That's a whole nother conversation, right? And AI, though, the reason why it's so germane to this conversation is because when you're training those algorithms, right, you have doctors who are putting their smarts in, and you have patients who are, their data's coming in and out of it. The FDA is adamant that when you train this, it has to represent the American public, or you better label for it and says this only works with people over 50, right? Or only with people under 20, right? Yeah. And I'm choosing age as a very non-controversial, demographic feature to stick in, right? But so, the new administration might loosen that up in the name of innovation and business, but, or try to loosen that up. But I don't know. The science and the public health is so clear to me. I don't think that'll work. FDA is still going to require that if your intended use says this works on people over the age of 18, it's going to work with all the demographic subpopulations. You got to show on paper that it works that way, or else it's going to leave out people that have always been left out. And I think society, and maybe at least the medical field, has taken a turn on that. They all really want to do better in that regard. And since this is a brand new technology, let's get it right now. I'm hopeful that the administration isn't going to change the FDA's requirement that at least you train these models and get the doctors that represent everybody, so that when you take this one thing, it'll work everywhere you put it. Does that make sense? I mean, you touched another thing that I feel a little passionately about.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's great. I love hearing your take on that. So that was good. We're getting near the end of the show. We have time for one last question, and it's our tradition to take a question from the past guest that doesn't know who's coming next, and I'll ask you that question. Then you'll have the opportunity to write a question for one of our future guests. So the question is,
no, I'm very disappointed the Steelers are out of the playoffs. If that's what they were going to ask, I'll jump the gun on that.
No, I won't talk about football because we have our own
biases,
loyalties there. Yeah.
But I'm a Lions fan, so we're definitely not talking about football.
Oh yeah.
Moving on.
Gotcha. So Alex, the question is, how do you measure success in your life?
Doing what's right by my spiritual beliefs, with family at the center. A faith in goodness first, I suppose, and family at the center. You get that straight, your business stuff will be okay. Your dealings with your neighbors will be okay. The police officer that pulls you over because you're speeding, even he deserves kindness and grace.
Wow, 100%. That's a great message.
That is. I love that. Yeah. I love that. Alex, I think we could easily talk for another hour or two. This has been a very engaging conversation. Thanks for bringing this really interesting piece of medical device and artificial intelligence and machine learning to the BioTalk Unzipped program. And just thanks so much for your time. It's great to have you on the show.
Well, Gregory and Chad, it has truly been an honor. It's wonderful to meet people that like to take the time to talk about such things, and then hopefully, produce some good and some entertainment for like-minded folks out there. So I'm honored, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity.
Likewise, thank you for me as well. I loved your message, and I loved what I learned from you. And I tell people this: I listen to our podcast because I get something out of it, and I'm really looking forward to listening to this one once the editing's done and it's released, because I want to take it all in again, if you can believe it.
All right, well, I'm available to you guys.
Yeah.
I love talking about this stuff. So,
thanks so much.
A little personally, you want to hit me up for questions every few months, or just chat, or go out for a virtual beer. I'm happy to do so.
Hey, thanks,
Awesome.
Alex.
All right, take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right.
It was a pleasure.
Take care.